Alright, let's go. Number 6. Generation ships. In 1929, British physicist J.D. Bernal published a vision that most of his contemporaries dismissed as fantasy. In a slim, provocative book called The World, the Flesh, and the Devil, he described a self-contained artificial world, a hollow sphere carrying thousands of people across the darkness between stars, a civilization traveling so far that the people who launched it would never see where it was going. The journey would begin with one generation and end with another that had never known Earth. The idea sounds simple enough. Build a ship large enough to sustain human life indefinitely. Point it toward a neighboring star and wait. The nearest candidate, Proxima Centauri b, a potentially habitable world orbiting our closest stellar neighbor at 4.24 light-years away, is the obvious target. At the fastest speeds humanity has ever achieved, roughly 70,000 kilometers per hour aboard NASA's Parker Solar Probe, the journey would take approximately 54,000 years. A generation ship doesn't solve that problem. It simply decides the problem doesn't need solving because the people who arrive won't be the people who left. What makes this concept genuinely unsettling isn't the engineering. The life support systems, the closed-loop recycling of air and water and waste, the agricultural modules. These are staggering challenges, but they are engineering challenges. The deeper problem is biological. In 2014, geneticist Cameron Smith of Portland State University published research in the journal Acta Astronautica, calculating that a generation ship would need to carry at least 98 people to maintain viable genetic diversity across centuries of travel. Other models push that number far higher, but genetics is almost the easy part. The harder problem is cultural. No human society has ever been deliberately engineered to function in perfect isolation, with a fixed singular purpose across hundreds of unbroken generations. Every civilization we know of has been shaped by contact with others, by trade, by conflict, by the arrival of new ideas from outside. A generation ship eliminates all of that. What governance system survives intact across 1,000 years of enforced isolation? What happens to the mission when Generation 400 simply decides they no longer want to go where Generation 1 was pointed? The ship may be the easiest part of what we would need to build. The harder construction project is a human culture stable enough, purposeful enough, and unified enough to survive the journey. And we have never built anything like that in the entire history of our species. Number 5. Cryogenic suspended animation. There is a species of microscopic animal, the tardigrade, that can survive temperatures within a fraction of a degree of absolute zero. It does this by entering a state called cryptobiosis, shutting down virtually every biological process, desiccating its own body to a husk, and simply waiting. Scientists have revived tardigrades from this state after decades. They emerge intact, resume feeding, and reproduce as though nothing happened. For decades, researchers have asked an obvious and deeply unsettling question. Could we do this to a human being? The concept is sometimes called a sleeper ship, a vessel carrying a frozen crew across interstellar distances, waking them only upon arrival. The appeal is straightforward. A human in deep torpor consumes almost no resources. NASA-funded researcher Dr. John Bradford of SpaceWorks Enterprises published a feasibility study in 2014 examining torpor induction for crewed Mars missions, estimating that reducing metabolic rate by approximately 75% could cut required food and water supplies for a 90-day journey from tens of thousands of kilograms down to a fraction of that. Applied to interstellar travel, the arithmetic becomes even more compelling. The biology, however, remains the central obstacle. Human vitrification, the preservation of tissue at sub-zero temperatures without the destructive formation of ice crystals, works reliably for individual cells and small organs. Corneas are vitrified and revived routinely. Embryos are preserved and thawed successfully. But the human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons connected by an estimated 100 trillion synapses, and the ice crystal damage that occurs during whole body freezing destroys the precise microscopic architecture on which memory and identity appear to depend. Therapeutic hypothermia, deliberately lowering body temperature to 32 or 33 degrees Celsius, is already used in hospitals following cardiac arrest, slowing brain damage while surgeons work. Patients have been cooled, clinically died, and been revived. The gap between that and a century of suspended animation is enormous, but it is not a gap defined by impossible physics. It is a gap defined by unsolved biology. The question that lingers isn't only whether we can freeze a person and revive them intact. The question is whether what wakes up on the other side of a 100-year sleep is the same person who went in, or whether the word same has any meaning at all when applied across that kind of silence. Number 4. Laser-propelled light sails. On April 12, 12, 2016, exactly 55 years to the day after Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to reach space, the physicist and billionaire Yuri Milner stood in New York City alongside Stephen Hawking and announced something that sounded on its surface like science fiction. He proposed sending a spacecraft to another star system within a generation. The spacecraft would weigh approximately 1 gram, and it would travel at 20% the speed of light. The project is called Breakthrough Starshot, and it is real, backed by $100 million in initial funding and the endorsement of some of the most respected physicists alive. The concept is built around a technology that genuinely exists: the light sail. A reflective sail just a few meters across attached to a gram-scale microchip carrying cameras, a power source, and a transmitter would be accelerated by a ground-based laser array, generating roughly 100 gigawatts of focused energy. The acceleration phase would last only minutes. The sail would reach 20% light speed, and if aimed correctly, arrive at the Alpha Centauri system, 4.37 light-years away, in approximately 20 years. The engineering barriers are extraordinary. The laser array required would span roughly 10 square kilometers and doesn't exist anywhere on Earth. The craft, traveling at 1/5 the speed of light, would strike interstellar dust grains with the effective impact energy of rifle bullets. Any slight misalignment during acceleration would destroy the sail entirely. And the gram-scale star chip at its center would need to survive all of this, capture images of another solar system, and transmit them back across more than 4 light-years to receivers on Earth, taking another 4 years to arrive. Stephen Hawking died on March 14th. 2018, 2 years after standing at that podium. Breakthrough Starshot continues without him, its technical teams working through each of these problems with the methodical patience of people who understand they are building something for their grandchildren. Breakthrough Starshot carries no humans. The leap from a gram-scale probe to a crewed vessel requires solving every one of these problems at a scale billions of times larger, and no funding announcement has yet addressed that gap. But this project may achieve something that changes everything anyway. The first photograph of another star's planets, confirmation that habitable worlds are real and reachable, and proof that the distance between stars is a problem of engineering, not a law of nature. Number 3, the Alcubierre warp drive. In 1994, a 28-year-old Mexican physicist named Miguel Alcubierre published a paper in the journal Classical and Quantum Gravity that did something no one had managed before. Working entirely within the mathematics of Einstein's general theory of relativity, the same equations that describe black holes, gravitational waves, and the expansion of the universe itself, he demonstrated that faster-than-light travel was theoretically possible, not by violating physics, by exploiting it. The standard objection to faster-than-light travel is that Einstein's equations forbid any object with mass from accelerating to light speed. The energy required becomes infinite as you approach it. Alcubierre's insight was to sidestep this entirely. His proposed drive doesn't move the ship through space. It moves space itself. The ship sits inside a bubble. Space contracts in front of it and expands behind it, carrying the bubble and everything inside at any velocity the operator chooses. The ship locally is always at rest. It never accelerates. It never exceeds light speed in its own reference frame. Einstein's equations are satisfied throughout. The original energy requirement was catastrophic. Alcubierre's initial calculations suggested that sustaining the warp bubble would require the total mass energy equivalent of the planet Jupiter, converted entirely into exotic fuel. Clearly impossible. But in 2012, NASA physicist Harold White at Johnson Space Center's Advanced Propulsion Physics Laboratory, known as EagleWorks, published a revised analysis. By altering the geometry of the warp bubble from a flat ring to an oscillating torus shape, White calculated that the energy requirement could theoretically drop to the mass energy equivalent of hundreds of kilograms. Still staggering. No longer planetary. The remaining barrier is exotic matter, a substance with negative energy density, required to hold the warp bubble open. This sounds like pure invention, but it isn't. The Casimir effect, a measurable quantum phenomenon, demonstrates that negative energy density is real and physically achievable between closely spaced metal plates. In 2021, physicist Eric Lentz published a further revision in Classical and Quantum Gravity, proposing a warp drive configuration that might not require exotic matter at all. The Alcubierre drive has not been built, not even close, but every year the theoretical objections to it quietly narrow. General relativity does not say this is impossible. It offers the mathematics to describe it. What remains is an engineering problem of incomprehensible scale, which is a very different thing from a physical impossibility, and the difference matters more than almost anything else in this list. Number 2, uploading human consciousness. In 2020, Researchers at the Genelia Research Campus in Virginia published the most detailed map of a brain ever completed, the full connectomy of a fruit fly, charting 25,000 neurons and 20 million synaptic connections in exhaustive three-dimensional resolution. It took years of work and produced a dataset of staggering complexity. It was also, by the standards of a human brain, almost nothing. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons connected by an estimated 100 trillion synapses. Mapping it completely would generate a dataset larger than the entire current internet, many times over. Yet the implications of the Genelia paper were immediately understood. If the structure of a mind can be mapped completely, it can theoretically be copied, and a copy, encoded as data, travels at the speed of light. A signal sent from Earth to Proxima Centauri b arrives in 4.24 years, compared to 54,000 years for a physical ship at current velocities. The most elegant solution to interstellar travel in this framework is to stop trying to move the body and simply transmit the mind. The scientific foundation for this idea is fragmentary but real. The Human Connectome Project, funded by the National Institutes of Health and launched in 2009, is progressively mapping the macro-scale connectivity of the human brain, though full synaptic level resolution remains decades away. The only complete connectome of any animal with a nervous system remains that of Caenorhabditis elegans, a roundworm with exactly 302 neurons, mapped by John White and colleagues in 1986. The distance between 302 neurons and 86 billion is not merely quantitative. The deeper problem was named in 1995 by philosopher David Chalmers, who called it the hard problem of consciousness. We have no scientific consensus on what consciousness actually is, whether it could survive being substrate independent, or whether a digital copy of a mind would constitute the same person or merely an identical replica. If you are scanned neuron by neuron and the scan is transmitted to a habitable planet 4 light years away, while the original is destroyed in the process, did you travel, or did you die, and send an extraordinarily convincing copy of yourself to arrive in your place? Every other method on this list moves a human body across the void. This one quietly asks whether the body was ever the point. And that question, once genuinely considered, does not resolve cleanly in either direction. Number 1. Traversible wormholes. In July 1935, Albert Einstein and his colleague Nathan Rosen published a paper in Physical Review describing a mathematical feature of general relativity that neither man believed could exist in physical reality. The equations describing black holes they discovered contained something unexpected: a bridge, a tunnel connecting two separate regions of space-time, potentially billions of light years apart, through which, in principle, matter might pass. They called it an Einstein-Rosen bridge. The distance between two stars becomes, inside this structure, the width of a door. For decades, the Einstein-Rosen bridge was considered a mathematical curiosity, present in the equations, absent from reality. Then, in 1988, physicist Kip Thorne of the California Institute of Technology and his colleagues published a landmark paper in Physical Review Letters, demonstrating that a traversible wormhole, one wide enough and stable enough for a human being to pass through, was consistent with general relativity, provided it could be threaded with exotic matter possessing negative energy density to prevent the throat from collapsing. Thorne's work was not speculation. It was rigorous theoretical physics, from a man who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in 2017 for his role in the first direct detection of gravitational waves, confirming that the mathematics of extreme gravity could be trusted. The exotic matter requirement remained the central obstacle. Then, in 2013, physicist Juan Maldacena and Leonard Susskind published what has become known as the ER equals EPR conjecture, a proposal that Einstein-Rosen bridges and quantum entanglement are not merely analogous phenomena, but the same phenomenon viewed at different scales. Every pair of entangled particles under this framework is connected by a microscopic wormhole. The universe is not merely consistent with wormholes. It may be threaded with them at the quantum level, invisibly everywhere at all times. In November 2022, a team led by physicists at Caltech used Google's Sycamore quantum computer to simulate a traversible wormhole for the first time. Using a 9-qubit system, the researchers encoded information, sent it through a simulated wormhole geometry, and confirmed it emerged on the other side. The paper was published in Nature. The scientific community was divided. Many physicists argued that what the experiment demonstrated was quantum teleportation expressed in the language of wormhole theory, not evidence of a physical tunnel through space-time. The Caltech team maintained that the distinction, in a universe where ER equals EPR may be true, is less clear than the critics assume. The debate continues. What the 2022 experiment confirmed is this: the physics of traversible wormholes is not the physics of dragons. It is testable, simulatable, and grounded in two of the most successful theories humanity has ever produced. General relativity does not forbid them. Quantum mechanics may already be using them. The Casimir effect confirms that negative energy, the one ingredient required, exists and is measurable. Every other method on this list is a way of enduring the distance between stars. The wormhole is the only idea in human science that makes the distance disappear entirely, and the universe, examined as carefully as we know how to examine it, has not yet told us we cannot build one. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.